business. Thank you for your continued support of our business and AFGC, and have a great conference.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Slew. It's a delight to have him back. There was one phase where he went out to California and he missed a couple years being with us, so we're delighted to have him back. Dennis just reminded me, everyone should have gotten a survey when you entered the room. Fill that out, because in this new technology, in this new day and age, we'll have the results of that when Dennis starts to speak shortly, thanks to he and a lot of his graduate students. So fill that out. And Dennis, what do they do when they finish it? Pass it to the end of the table?
Yeah, pass it to the end of the table. We'll pick it up here in just a little bit after your talk. And we'll summarize it at the panel discussion at the very end.
Okay. So what you're doing is giving them permission not to pay attention to my talk. Is that right? Folks, fill that out, pass it to either end of the table, and don't worry, because some people will be coming in and picking that up. But that'll be a big help to us as we think through it. Now, for those of you standing in the back, I really want to encourage you to find a seat, because we're going to be here for a little while. And there are some, if somebody would put some of those seats that's stacked up back there, there's some, and let's make sure we try to get everybody who wants to sit down. Robert says he's got some more chairs coming. Those of you in the hall, please come on in. Do not dare to go to another session. This is where we want you. And put some seats along the wall over there if we need to, Robert, and along the wall over here. Now, Byron mentioned an announcement this morning. I'm not going to be the one giving you that information. What I'm going to do is go back and do something that I have been doing for over 40 years. I'm going to be talking about a topic that I guess the very first topic I talked about as a forage specialist in the state of Kentucky was clovers. I did that because when I came, Warren Thompson told me, he said, there's some things you must talk about. Clovers is one and alfalfa is number two. And so I started talking about those. And when we talk about that, and we talk about clovers, there are a lot of important reasons to grow clovers. And I want to just remind us of some of those as we begin thinking about this important topic of clovers for the 21st century. Now, if we think about clovers, clovers have played a critically important role, especially in states like Kentucky, but in other states across the U.S. Clovers have played a very important role historically. Clovers are playing a very important role at present, and I believe that the future, especially after we hear today's announcement, the future of clovers throughout this country and abroad is certainly extremely bright. So I hope you will agree with me, and I want to go back and review some things. First, if we think about the state of Kentucky, just as an example, we've got about 7 million acres of forage land in this state. And if we think about that and break it down, tall fescue is our dominant grass species that covers the vast majority of the pasture acreage in the state. In fact, about 5.5 million of those acreage are dominated by tall fescue. And then more significantly, about 85% of all the tall fescue we have in this state, it does have the toxic endophyte. So that has been a very significant reason why clovers have played such an important role in this state. When I came here, Warren Thompson told me that the most important pasture improvement program in the state of Kentucky was pasture renovation. Pasture renovation, by its simplest definition, is getting clovers established into these grass-dominant sods. Now, I spent 41 years with UK, and at the end of that, I conclude that Warren was exactly right. And over the last 50 years, pasture renovation, in my opinion, has been the most important forage improvement practice in this state. Now, if we think about pasture renovation, basically, it's just incorporating some of these legumes, and for us, dominantly clovers, into grass-dominant sods. Research would have shown, and farmer experience, if we do that, we have the potential to improve the yield, the quality, take advantage of these legumes for nitrogen fixation, and then depending on the legume, a deeper rooted legume, we can have better summer production. Now, all of those have been important, and when we think about Kentucky, and we think about what legumes and what clovers do we grow, of all the legumes in Kentucky, clovers dominate. We have more clovers in Kentucky than all other legumes combined. Alfalfa would be second. Of the clovers in the state, white clover is the most dominant. Red clover is the most dominant renovation legume. Now there's going to be there's seats being brought in on the right, so everybody should get a seat here momentarily, and we can get some more back on the left. Now, a few years ago, Don Ball called me and said, you know, I think it'd be a good idea if we put together a publication on the reasons to grow clover. So he had sent a really nice draft, and I said, that really looks good, Don, let's do it. So he had it done, and we did it. And basically this publication, many of you have it. It's available at the booth. He'll give you a copy of it. The PowerPoint that I'll share is on most of our websites, but it just goes back to the basics, and it lists in there 10 great reasons for growing clover. Now I admit some of these are greater than others. The 4 that I mentioned that's been the basis for our reason for using clovers in Kentucky are really the 4 big agronomic and economically significant ones, but there are others. And I want to just highlight a few of those. And if we think about this and think of the roller coaster ride we've been in the last decade with nitrogen, availability, and price, we know that this is a very important reason for growing clovers, for growing legumes in general. And if we think about that, and just pull information on the legumes from, say, Southern Forage Book, and we look at that, how much can we get per acre per year? And it's going to depend on which legume we use and how much growth we get on that legume for the growing season. But in general, when we look at it from the annuals to our highest producing perennial legume, alfalfa, we would be somewhere in that 40 to 200 pounds per acre per year contributed to the system for which those legumes are present. Now, if we look at that and put a price on it, and just let's just say we take red clover at 55 cents a pound for nitrogen, that could be in the range of $41 to $110 per acre per year if we think about that. So if we think about that alone, we can really make a good case for growing these legumes and these clovers in that. Increased forage quality, when we look at the tall fescue with the endophyte, this is a biggie. Anytime that we can get anything to improve our clovers, dilute some of the impacts of those alkaloids, it certainly means a lot. If we look at legumes in general, they're higher in quality than the grasses. Legumes are usually digested more rapidly. And then one thing we don't give legumes as much credit for is rate of passage. Intake drives animal performance. And rate of passage, an hour spent in the rumen, certainly indicates quality. So that's a very important factor. If we look at a study conducted by a very dear friend of this organization, Carl Hublin, he just had fescue with nitrogen, fescue without nitrogen, but had clover added. If you look at that, and this was Ladonna clover too, not our highest producing clover. Average daily gain on steers was about a half a pound per day. Look at total gains per acre, 104 pounds more beef produced per acre. And then look at total gain, 582 versus 374. Now I can buy a little more expensive seed. I can buy a little lime. I might be able to buy some phosphorus and potassium with that. If we look at the conception rates in the southeast, for example, we're cow-calf states. We need to get that cow bred. We need to have a calf every year if we're going to be profitable. If we look at that, these two states here, and look at conception rates where the clovers were present, a 14% increase or a 20% increase in conception rates. Improved growth distribution. Certainly here in our state, we're cool season grasses. We have a summer slump. If we have a deeper rooted clover in there, that can help bridge some of that gap. If we go farther south and look where, say, Bermuda grass dominates, we can use winter annual clovers there to help bridge some of that gap, to help get us on earlier, to help keep us on later in the fall. So it can play a role there. Increased forage yield certainly have the potential here. If we think about it, the very first study conducted in the state of Kentucky on pasture renovation was conducted by Bill Templeton and Tim Taylor. This has been one of the basic studies to show the impact of clovers on yield. In this case, it was red clover versus end-to-tall fescue versus nitrogen at 3 rates. And the bottom line, for sake of time, with red clover, the second year, looking at just dry matter, nothing about quality. Red clover the second year produced more total dry matter than did that same fescue fertilized with 180 units of nitrogen. Now this is a study out of the South where the only comparison was the grass was ryegrass with 200 pounds of nitrogen. And then look where Carl put a whole lot of different things in there. Now, no nitrogen on the airleaf clover produced almost, probably non-significant, difference between that and 200 pounds of nitrogen on the ryegrass. And you can see the other differences as we go down through there. Now, one of the things that we saw in the video a little bit earlier was the role of cover crops and the role of legumes and clovers in crop rotations over the last decade especially. We've seen a dynamic increase in the interest and opportunities for cover crops in general and the role clovers can play in that. And we're still learning about this every day, but the opportunities certainly are numerous. When we look at opportunities for clovers to improve some of our animal-related problems, think about grass tetany, for example. In this state, when we usually get clovers up enough that animals are able to consume at least a significant amount of clover, we're usually over our grass tetany period. But think about the biggie that has been worked on in this state and throughout the Southeast, and using clovers to overcome and dilute some of the alkaloids in this tall fescue so that basically we can have that fungus cost us a lot less money each year. But I think when we get down to the bottom line, and that is we have a potential to improve profit when we have clovers involved in our program. Now I say the potential because we can lose money big time by going out and putting clovers in and maybe growing more and maybe not utilizing it effectively. So I say the potential to do that. Probably the best study that I'm aware of in the U.S. where that is shown is a study out of Auburn University. And I know I hate to give a lot of credit to that, but anyway, this one out of Auburn University. Basically, I don't know of another state that's conducted more stalker research than Auburn. But what they did a few years ago, Don Ball and Animal Science, they went back to all the studies they could find in Auburn using stalkers that had good replication, good science behind it, and good statistics. And they put that together, and they published a brochure on that, and that's available on the websites and see Don. But basically what they found, when they went back through the literature, they found 37 different studies involving legumes. And when they looked at those, now keep in mind, this is Auburn, this is Alabama, this is a state that does not grow red clover and white clover like we do here in Kentucky. So keep that in mind as we take a look at it. But of these 37 studies, basically the lowest cost per pound of gain and 8 of the lowest 10 costs involved forage legumes. Now that was very significant, and I think that speaks a lot to it. Dennis is going to address in more detail other aspects today, but I think when we look at clovers and we look at the opportunities we see here now, and we're looking at this AFGC conference, and over the years all the different conferences that we've discussed clovers at, I do believe that the opportunities for, the need for clovers as we look down the road is extremely bright. So that's what we want to visit with you today. Wanted to give you this as some background. So we want to bring now, and the survey, we get them all in also, okay? So as we're getting all the microphones changed, want to tell you that we're going to have 3 more speakers, and the 3 speakers that are going to come on, Dennis is going to come on and follow up with some of the things, go into more depth of what I've talked about. And then we're going to deal with some of the things that Dr. Slew indicated that we're going to be sharing with you today. So make sure all the green sheets are turned in to the middle or to the ends. It'd be probably better to turn them into the ends than in the middle. Okay. All right, any quick question while we're getting this other PowerPoint up?
You didn't say a word about alfalfa.
That's because this is a clover symposium. But I assure you, Carl, you know me well enough, I'll be happy to discuss alfalfa at length at break, okay? Yeah, oh, it does. It has the best taproot.
I'll talk about alfalfa in a minute. I'll get you fixed.